At first glance, the Galapagos Islands don't look like a paradise in peril. They teem with astonishing wildlife, much of it unique to the archipelago. 170 years ago, these creatures inspired the naturalist Charles Darwin to develop the theory of evolution. Almost all the species he saw are still there today. But there's now a darker side to the picture. The human inhabitants here are engaged in a very different battle for survival of the fittest. And it's all about what this place should be. A wildlife haven to be protected for the benefit of the planet, or a resource to be exploited for the benefit of a few. These are some of the men who want to exploit it. The island's militant and powerful commercial fishermen. In recent months, they've staged a series of violent protests against the National Park Administration, charged with protecting the land and sea life. The dispute has effectively crippled the park's conservation programs. Rangers have been beaten. Scores of the park's best workers have been forced to leave. Anti-poaching patrols have been halted. Until recently, Fernando Ortiz was director of the park's marine reserve.
Morale. There's not such a thing, I would say. From those of us who are seriously committed to conservation, for those of us who have been, have been part of this place for a long time, right now it's like we're just touching the bottom. I don't think things have been any worse ever in the national park.
Not so long ago, Galapagos was a calm and peaceful place. It's an outpost of Ecuador, a turbulent South American nation with a history of coups and crises. But until recently, the island seemed immune from the troubles on the mainland. Biologist and former boat captain Godfrey Merlin moved here in the early 70s to immerse himself in nature.
It was almost a sort of unknown place, especially in Ecuador. Sort of just an outpost, a backwater with very little economy. There were a few cows which were sent to the mainland. There was a bit of salted fish exported, but it was very, very low-key. There was very small boats, bottom fishing, very few people.
But today, Galapagos is a bustling community dominated by money. There's a booming tourism industry with more than 100,000 visitors each year. The islands are now surrounded by an armada of cruise boats. And more than 20,000 people live in small towns alongside the national park. Almost 1,000 of them are professional fishermen, lured by soaring demand for one of Galapagos' most valuable species, sea cucumbers. Prized as an aphrodisiac in Asia, they can sell to upmarket restaurants for up to $600 a kilogram.
People have seen dreams in Galapagos. On the mainland of Ecuador, they've seen a way out of their poverty and their problems there. And you can understand that people who never had anything are, this is a gold field. And I think to this day, Galapagos is seen as a place paved with gold and a place to solve all your problems.
The goldfield is the Marine Reserve, the world's largest after the Great Barrier Reef. That's put fishermen on a collision course with the national park. The past decade has seen repeated clashes as park rangers tried to limit the sea cucumber quota, culminating last year when the park tried to ban the annual 3-month season. In protest, fishermen on the main island of Santa Cruz invaded the national park headquarters. Their leader was the fishing cooperative president, Rogelio Huaycho.
Sí, efectivamente, la situación del pescador actual es muy difícil. A pesar del pescador ser uno de los que siempre ha hecho soberanía, ha hecho patria aquí en Galápagos. Y el sector pesquero siempre cada vez se han creado leyes inclusive para tratar de que desaparezca de Galápagos, ¿no? Entonces, de esta manera el sector pesquero no le dejaron otra opción.
To the rangers' dismay, the government gave in to the fishermen's demands and overturned the ban, setting a quota of 4 million sea cucumbers. The effect was to all but wipe out the species. Fishermen collected fewer than 3 million cucumbers before the stocks were exhausted.
This year we just documented the economical extinction of the sea cucumber. We don't have sea cucumbers any longer. They are gone. We warned them about the consequences of this. They would have to go deeper, they would have to stay longer, they would make less money, and that happened. Actually, this year we had a record for decompression sickness.
It might seem strange that fishing could be favoured over conservation in a World Heritage Site. But the issues here are more about politics than wildlife, and here's why. Galapagos is not just a national park, it's Ecuador's smallest province, giving this tiny community 2 representatives in the National Congress. Now, 1,000 kilometres away in the capital, Quito, the government has such a slim majority it depends on the vote of the pro-fishing congressman here. And that, according to some conservationists, has made fishermen one of the island's most protected species.
They have lots of political leverage. Even though the money they produce accounts for only about 20% of what the Galapagos Islands produce gross income to the country. They have the right, as we say here, the right godfather. So, yeah, they have much more power than everybody else.
So every time there's a protest, the government caves in?
Exactly. Always. I mean, there's no exception to that rule.
The militant fishing leader, Rogelio Huaycho, is one of the men the government now depends on for survival. He's an independent congressman, but he's consistently voted with the government in return for political favours. He insists he represents the whole community.
Pero yo tengo una mentalidad diferente. No tengo intereses solamente para un grupo de personas, sino mi interés como diputado es velar porque todos vivamos bien aquí en Galápagos, ¿no? Dignamente, y respetemos las leyes vigentes en la provincia.
Critics claim he only represents himself, being one of the few fishermen who can afford a large boat and employ a crew to work it.
He is a businessman. of fishing. Okay, he has not been on a fishing boat for years. He doesn't know anymore, what it means to be out and do some fishing.
Most of the licensed fishermen are small operators, using hand lines to catch fish and primitive air compressors to dive for more valuable catch like lobsters and sea cucumbers. For all their political clout, most struggle to make a living. The reason is that the government has allowed more fishermen to come here than conventional fishing can support.
Parece que hoy día no ha habido pesca.
There's no fish today.
Titi Torres and his wife Yvonne are typical of the local fishing community. Most days the catch is not enough to even cover the cost of fuel. Today, after 3 hours at sea, they've caught only one fish.
A complete fish per pound would be like $1 per pound.
So it's not much for a morning's work, is it?
No, for 3 people especially.
With debts to pay and a family to support, they're relying on whatever is left of the island's sea cucumbers.
As a wife of a fisherman, I'll tell you, we depend on the sea cucumbers. Whatever my husband makes during the sea cucumber season, thank God we can save and use it for the rest of the year.
For years, the government has been promising to find alternative jobs for fishermen. But they've so far been frozen out from the island's only other industry, tourism. It's been monopolised by big mainland operators, many with close links to the Ecuadorian government.
Es de que a Galápagos nunca se le ha favorecido al habitante, con decirle que ni siquiera el turismo favorece al habitante de Galápagos. Porque es un turismo que pasa, un turismo selectivo que solamente el habitante lo ve. Le deja la carestía de la vida, le deja la basura, pero no beneficios.
Thanks to the tourist boom, housing, food and services are now far more expensive than on the mainland.
We've reached a situation where we've got too many people seeking too few resources, becoming poorer, and the cost rising. That situation, as I said, is very worrying and potentially a great danger for Galapagos.
The national park has been caught between the voracious demands of the tourism and fishing sectors. The government has repeatedly interfered in the park's management, sacking senior staff who tried to regulate commercial activity. The park has had 11 different directors in less than 2 years.
Just tell me, how can any institution work? How can any institution, carry on with any project if they have a new leader every month and a half or so? That is not possible.
Park rangers have struggled to continue policing the marine reserve, painstakingly checking boats along 1,500 kilometres of coastline and 133,000 square kilometres of ocean. Even with air patrols, it's been impossible to stop illegal fishing or even gauge how much is going on. The size of some of their seizures suggests it's become a major illicit industry, with fishermen spreading their catch to shark fins, another prized delicacy in Asia. But Ecuador's Environment Minister, Fabián Valdivieso, says constant changes to park management have not hindered its operations.
El Parque Nacional Galápagos tiene alrededor de 300 funcionarios, todos técnicos, calificados, expertos en su respectiva área de trabajo, que son los que garantizan la estabilidad del parque. El trabajo fundamental del parque lo hacen esos funcionarios.
¡Fuera la politiquería! ¡Fuera! ¡El parque qué hace!
The rangers disagree. Last September, all but a handful of staff went on strike in protest at the government's latest interference. The minister sacked yet another director, replacing him with this man, Fausto Cepeda, a paid advisor to the fishermen.
Pero es un profesional con la formación y la experiencia como para desempeñar ese puesto.
But he had been advising the fishermen, who are arguably the greatest threat to the environment.
La población en Galápagos es muy pequeña, entonces las actividades que se pueden realizar también son pocas. Y de una u otra manera, los técnicos que hay en Galápagos, que no son muchos, están ligados con los grupos que hacen uso de la reserva marina.
The rangers blockaded the park, refusing to accept the new appointment. Fausto Cepeda arrived at the barricade, backed by an angry crowd of fishermen and their wives.
Entonces, no vamos a cambiar, licenciado. Hemos estado aquí suficientes días manteniendo la misma posición con altura y pues seguimos en ella, licenciado, ¿no? Y nada más, yo no creo tener nada más que decir en nombre de mis compañeros aquí presentes. Muchas gracias.
While Cepeda tried to negotiate his way in, his fishermen supporters broke down the rangers' barricades and stormed in. The ferocity of the attack stunned the rangers and brought embarrassing international attention to Ecuador's mismanagement of Galapagos. The government withdrew Cepeda's appointment. But as soon as the controversy died down, it went back to its old tricks.
England needs you to help him cross the ice block.
We arrived on Galapagos to find the park director had just been changed again. The new man's first act was to remove Fernando Ortiz as director of the Marine Reserve. We arrived to interview him just as he was giving his family the bad news.
I just got this memo today signed by the director. I was just removed from the Marine Resources area, and I'm going to be stuck in natural resources or so. Basically, what they have done is froze me. Hopefully, the person who's appointed for the Marine Reserve right now is going to follow up. But they're not going to keep somebody there to do whatever, unless this person does whatever they ask him to do.
Como el proceso incluye no solamente los estudios de
As staff were reeling from the changes, the Environment Minister arrived from the mainland to lay down a new philosophy for the park to follow. While stressing the government's commitment to conservation, he told rangers they had to think more of the local community.
Es indispensable cambiar la filosofía de lo que se hace en Galápagos. Hasta aquí se ha atendido mucho a la conservación y se ha descuidado el aspecto humano. la calidad de vida de la población.
It was the trigger for a shake-up that has left the park in a shambles. Weeks later, the new director effectively sacked nearly a third of the park staff. Fernando Ortiz found he'd not only been removed as marine director, along with 123 other rangers, his contract was not renewed. He was out of a job.
They don't want to have anybody there who they cannot control, anybody who's going to be doing things legally, or anybody who's going to really, assume a position that can be read as conservation. They just want some puppet to do whatever they want them to do, and that's it. That's not me, that's for sure.
The chaos has left the Marine Reserve at the mercy of poachers. With no marine director and a drastic shortage of rangers, sea patrols were suspended. It's now questionable if the park will again have the ability or the will to protect the environment.
The National Park Service has built up a reputation because of what it has done in this marvelous environment. All of that is going to go into the sewers because, again, of a political circumstance.
And more trouble is looming. Fishermen are now demanding the right to use environmentally dangerous longlines. Many warn there'll be violence if the park tries to stop this year's sea cucumber season.
If they don't get the sea cucumber, there's going to be a social problem. They won't have enough for a living, and I don't know what's going to happen in my family or other families, fishermen.
The archipelago will remain a place of wonder for anyone who comes here. And dedicated rangers will do their best to protect it. But there are real fears the ongoing disruption risks destroying what makes Galapagos unique.
Galapagos is one of the very few places left on this planet which has virtually all its original inhabitants intact, and just for that reason, they're worth looking after. I think there's something deeply philosophical about the atmosphere of Galapagos. It's difficult to explain, impossible to explain, but I think the world will be a sadder and a more aggressive place without places like Galapagos.